listening to the VetTunes Podcast, where we shine the spotlight on veteran artists and artists in the music industry. Stand by for transmission. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the VetTunes Podcast, where we shine the spotlight on military and veteran artists and those in the music industry. And today we have a very special guest, Miss Casey Fall. She's a retired Coast Guard search and rescue helicopter pilot and an amazing singer-songwriter. So we're going to get to know more about her story and get a special exclusive live performance. And we also want to thank our new partners, Reach Across America Radio, and you can check us out on the Reach Across America radio station and also on VetTunesPodcast.com and wherever you get your podcasts. So, Casey, welcome to Harmony Hill and welcome to the VetTunes Podcast.
Thank you so much for letting me be here.
It is it's awesome that you could be here. I know you were had a quick stop in Nashville, so to be able to swing by here on your travels, we appreciate having you, and I can't wait for our folks to learn more about you and then hear you.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your journey to the Coast Guard.
Sure. It's one of those, I call them heart click moments. When I was 13 and we dropped off my oldest brother at his Coast Guard boot camp experience called Swab Summer. He went to the Coast Guard Academy, and they had a helicopter demonstration in the river. So a rescue swimmer is jumping out and somebody's talking on either like a megaphone or something. And I was just 13 and I got to watch that. And that's when I just felt that moment, where all of a sudden you're like, poof, that's what I want to do.
Heart click. That's a great.
It's just, your gears like click into position, right? And it was in my heart that just hit that position. And so I am very lucky that since I was 13, have known what I wanted to go and do. And so chased after it, got into the Coast Guard Academy, and then did not get flight school right out of the academy. So I graduated and I had to go to a ship out of Sheboygan, Michigan. It was an icebreaker / buoy tender. But then I got picked up for flight school after only about 6 months on the ship, and then got to go flight school, and then got accepted into helicopters, and then I served as a helicopter pilot up in Port Angeles, Washington, where then that is the only place that I served because I got a few concussions and was ultimately medically retired. But
so how long did you fly for?
5 years of up there. I started flight school at the end of 2016, and then ultimately retired though in the middle of 2024, July 2024. But I was stationed in Port Angeles for those 5 years, and the last couple, you're not flying all the time anymore because of being medically grounded, but 3 really solid years of flying that Coast Guard Dolphin, the 65.
Yeah, tell us about that. I mean, what was that like?
Oh, it's my little kid inside of me, my dream come true of getting to play the hero and every day doing the job that I trained to go do, and had some good rescues. And you stand duty for 24 hours from depends on your station, but typically 3 p.m. to 3 p.m. And you stay there for those 24 hours and you're just waiting for the call, just like, firefighters or ambulance, you're just waiting to go. And so it's kind of a messed up mentality that somebody's worst day, is what I'm excited to go do. Mm-hmm. But it was such an honor to be able to go do that. And being stationed in Port Angeles, Washington, you get all the weather. It was one of the best places, I think, and I'm biased, to be a baby pilot growing up, because you learn how to fly, in not crazy heat, but you have, hot days, and then you have winter, snow, mountains. You still have offshore things of doing rescues to cruise ships, big waves, fishermen, international airspace, because Canada is right there. So how do you talk to them? Seattle is right there. And so that's a very busy airspace. So you have to learn it all. Mm-hmm. How to do cliff rescues. Just such a great place. And no offense to Florida or anything, but Florida's very hot and very flat.
Yeah.
Which, but then you have thunderstorms and hurricanes, and it's a very different type of flying. But I was very, very, very blessed and lucky to grow up in the Port Angeles area.
That's awesome. That's
Loved it.
awesome. I mean, to be able to go out there and see your training and your career culminate in saving somebody's life.
Yeah.
I mean, that just has to be a pretty amazing and fulfilling experience.
Yeah. And awesome to see how the Coast Guard and just rescue services in general utilize helicopters, because there's times when a boat can't get to where the people in danger are or wherever they're having a problem, or, a ground search party can't get to them up on the cliff or whatever it is. And so it's so, so cool to be able to have a team that can do something that nobody else can in that moment. Yeah, definitely. Like can I tell you a sea story?
Please do.
So I was still a co-pilot, and there was off the West Coast, classic Washington and Oregon, there's these coves and rocky like spires and things that are near the shore and on the shore. And these fishermen, there was 3 fishermen and one of their teenage sons, and they were quite large individuals, but their engine on their fishing boat completely died, and they were drifting towards shore. And of course, this is a classic Coast Guard story of it's in the middle of the night, it's dark and it's stormy, and there was some pretty big waves. And the Coast Guard small boat that they had sent out there wasn't able to get to them because their boat was getting sucked into one of those coves. And so thankfully those three men and one of their sons, they actually had to jump off of their boat onto one of those rocky outcropping things. But it was so wavy that the Coast Guard small boat wasn't able to safely get to them on that rock. And so it's like, that's when the helicopter comes in and can do the job, but it was close to the cliff. Classic pilot talking with my hands here, but it was close to the cliff, and then there's these trees that are sticking out over the top. So when you bring in a helicopter and you've got these rotor discs, you have to be very careful that you're not going to clip a tree and damage your helicopter, right? But then you're trying to save these guys. And we watched their boat get sucked in and smashed to bits. And so I'm so glad that they thought to get off the boat. But then because they were also so large, we would take one at a time. And so we'd pick them up, take them back to a safe place on land, come back at the next one. We left our rescue swimmer there in between hops, and each time you come back in, you slide it, and you feel so close to those tree branches, and you're so worried. And of course, with the storm and how it was happening, there was these downdrafts coming up and over these trees, and downdrafts in helicopters make you, come down, and it makes you have to manage power in very specific ways, and can be a little scary, especially as you're picking up a heavy load. But at the end of the day, we were able to do it safely, and everybody got home. And so it was just a really, really, that's one of the rewarding ones, when you're like, they would have had to wait for the storm to pass through for a small boat to go get them, kind of a thing. Because even a ground party, you can't get them from shore.
I can't imagine that water,
that's the other
hypothermia
thing.
would set in quickly.
They only had one Gumby suit, which they'd given to the kid, which I understand, and they had life jackets. But yeah, in that water up there, you've got minutes. If you're not wearing any sort of protectiveness, the standard that we use is that, you have minutes to live. And obviously there's people that make it longer than that, and then there's people that make it less than that.
Sure.
Because your individual body composition makes a difference. But it is a very short amount of time if you are in the water. And so if they're on the rocks, you'd like to think that they have longer, but you're still getting smashed with water. You're getting rained on. There's wind. Hypothermia is an absolute concern. But we got them.
That's awesome.
Got them back.
And did you get to meet them?
No. So where we dropped them off was in Nia Bay, and that's maybe 30 minutes from where our home base is. And so, yes, meet them as in like, okay, we got you back here. Do you have somebody to come get you to make sure you're safe and good to go? Because, they didn't need or denied, I forget all the details, either didn't need or denied medical care, of like an ambulance or anything. And then that's it, right? You say, okay, we got to take the bird home, and you wait for the next call. And thankfully that one, everybody was okay. Sometimes you do get the follow-up afterwards of if somebody made it after you brought them to the hospital or if not, but there's no requirement to do so. But it is really cool when we do get to hear if somebody pulled through.
Now, what was the timeline for that? So, like a distress call comes in from the boat.
Yep.
And that goes to
our land unit called Sector, and they are the brains behind who's going to go where. So just kind of like dispatch.
That's your dispatch, yeah.
And so they had already been talking with the small boat station, so they sent them. And then because the boat was getting sucked in and then they jumped off, right, they're like, okay, now we need to send a helicopter. And from when that call comes in, where we stand duty, you have 30 minutes to be up in the air.
And that's from a cold start?
From a cold start.
Okay.
You are dead asleep.
Mm-hmm.
You have 30 minutes to get your butt out there and fire that thing up and be up in the air. And, when you've been doing it for a few years, that no problem. You can get it up a lot faster. 15 minutes is some of like our fastest from when I was there, because you just happen to be sitting next to the helicopter in your gear, ready to go. And so you're like, let's go. Because the startup process can take a little while. You got to make sure, all your electronics boot up and the computer sync to your GPS and all those things. And, but yeah, 30 minutes. And then it takes about 30 minutes for us to get out there. So, and that's pretty fast of that happening.
So the aircraft itself, crew, how many folks are on there?
Standard crew is 2 pilots, aircraft commander and your co-pilot. And then you have a flight mechanic, who's kind of like the engineer and runs the hoist up and down for the rescue swimmer, who then is either jumping into the water or being hoisted up and down.
Yeah.
But yeah, 4. You can fly it single pilot, but pretty non-standard, and there's a lot of weight considerations that go into whether or not you're going to do that.
Right.
But you can't do that in the bigger one.
One of my favorite shows was Deadliest Catch.
Ah.
Right? So
I've actually never seen that.
Yeah, but you've got these, relatively small boats. I mean, compared to being in the Marine Corps and being on, with the Navy and big ships with, helicopters and jets and things.
Right.
These are pretty small boats, and
Tiny.
they are dealing with significant waves.
Yes.
Have you done a rescue like that?
No, thankfully. So we train, for all the scenarios, so hopefully, what to do. But I never had to do any sort of actual rescue to any boat with a lot of rigging. Mm-hmm. All those wires coming down, and that's where a lot of these fishing vessels have such a dangerous environment, is from all that. And no, so thankfully I never did. We got lots of calls for it, especially I got to go to Dutch Harbor. I was deployed one summer just for a couple months on the back of a ship that was coming out of Kodiak, and then you go along the Aleutian chain, and we would harbor in Dutch Harbor, and that's where the Deadliest Catch is out of. So there's lots of stories there. But then we went up into the Bering Sea and above the Arctic Circle and things like that. And yeah, we had a few calls come in. But when you're on a ship and you're however many miles away, and you turn around and you start going to wherever the ship that's having a problem is, for us that summer, none of those actually panned out. We never had to launch on them, but
which is a good thing in retrospect.
Yes, absolutely. We flew around a lot of them. So then that's the other part. Not just doing search and rescue, but you do fisheries management. And so you'll fly over the fishing fleet and make sure that they're actually fishing in the legal areas. And then are they catching the right types of fish? And if there's any sort of suspicious activity, you can launch your small boat and board them. And so we had a few of those where we were making sure everything was going the right way.
Yeah.
But thankfully they were all fine.
Good stuff. What was your most harrowing moment where you're like, ooh, this is dicey?
Mm-hmm. It wasn't even on a rescue, but it's when on that deployment, we were going back and forth with leadership on whether or not we should land the helicopter on the ship again to come from Dutch Harbor back to Kodiak. And we had a small window of weather, good weather, which was not good, but it was good enough. And that's one of the things that broke some of my faith in the safety systems that we put in place for our members, and especially in aviation, that safety is always going to be the number one priority, and it should be, and it is, until it isn't. And there are times when it's okay to step outside of safety protocol, and that's, again, part of your training regimen, is knowing when to do that for saving a life. There are times when you can push the limits of the helicopter and your fatigue limits and things like that in order to save a life. You can never put your crew's lives at risk, however. It's never okay. And so you need to know the difference and have those judgment calls. And so we were getting ready to take off from land to then get onto the ship to just ride it back. Those, I don't know how far that is to go from Dutch Harbor to Kodiak, but a few days on a ship. And what we had worked out was, because it was unsafe, there's limits to how much a ship can be pitching and rolling for when you come in and land. And they were already at the limits in our good weather window and often going intermittently in and out of them. And because there was a storm coming, classic, as there always is when you're trying to make these decisions, there's a storm coming. The safest thing that we decided for our crew was actually to island hop and fly the helicopter back. We could beat the storm. You could stay ahead of it. But that time frame to make that decision was in the same time frame of when they were trying to say that we needed to get on the ship. And the logic that we were given from high up above all the way down the chain, because it went very high, which is also hilarious, that a safety decision was having to go all the way up to admirals, was that, if a helicopter is down on the back of the ship, then it's no longer as good of a search and rescue asset. And so as they are the capability, which is, and I understand from a leadership perspective, like, you've got these AORs and you need to be able to respond to things, but never at the sacrifice of your crew, right? Right. And it's one of those things that when you're sitting in even the dispatch, we get so mad at people that are doing the dispatch calls at sector. It's one thing to be sitting in an office and say, okay, hey, helicopter, go there. But then when you're in it and you have the environmental factors that are happening, we have always been taught that you have the autonomy to say no when it is unsafe. And so all of us were saying no, it is unsafe as a crew. And they said, do it anyway. And there's some navigation you have to do with playing the game, right? Of how many but sirs are you able to give? And we gave our 1, we gave our 2, and then they're saying, no, you will get on that ship. And just, unfortunate how that happened. But of course then, so we're like, okay, we have a certain amount of time, we have a certain amount of gas that we can circle around. And when you get into limits, we'll come in. And then you start to hear over the radio things that are not clear on where the limits are, And there's times where it's okay for it to be intermittent. And so you sit back and you watch the ship. And when it's intermittent, then you wait for the big waves to come. and then you go because it's in a smaller window. But it takes time to be able to watch that. And we are watching that and tracking it, and you count everybody's. It's beautiful when the teamwork does work, because we are all trying not to die. But you start to count the time between the waves and how big things are. And again, I'm just a co-pilot for this endeavor, and my aircraft commander let me sit right seat, which has all the better visuals for landing on a ship. And I was like, that's kind of making it seem like you're going to have me do the landing. But cool at the same time. It's kind of like why you're here, right? Is that you want to be able to do the thing, and you practice, and we do this. So ultimately, the radio calls do not give us the warm and fuzzies. They are consistently out of limits. They are consistently way out of limits. And so we keep saying no, no, no. And then they finally just are like, you need to get on the ship.
Put it down.
Because we were going to just wait them out was the ultimate thing, right? At a certain time, you run out of gas and you have to either be on the ship or you have to come back to land. And if it's out of limits, it's pretty black and white. And of course, so they're saying, get on the ship. And so we're like, all right, we'll give it a go. But if it's unsafe at all, you wave off and you fly away. And so he let me do the approach. He let me do the landing. And, it's a good story because we get over the top, and the flight mech, they lay down on the floor and their head is sticking out as they're helping you line up. There's this, I call it a beak, but it's called a talon that shoots down from underneath the helicopter and grabs into a grid. And the grid is probably about this big, but it's in the middle of the helicopter. So you can't see it as the pilot. So you just have to go off of these references that are in front and beside you and pray that you hit it. And that's why the guy's laying down, is to help you line up. But again, are you guys communicating well? Is how he sees it helping you line it up? So ultimately, we get in, get over top, throw it down, snagged it. It was great. Success story. Ride the ship all the way back. But it was so against, and it was bad. I mean, you watch the pitch and roll, and it's scary to be right behind a ship that is pitching so much. That's a big difference. And, if you time it wrong, as if you come down and the ship is coming up, that's a hard landing. And if as it's going down though, and you time it wrong, then you're going to keep going down further than you're expecting. So then did you keep the position? Did you slide at all? Oh man, it was scary, but we made it. And, had a lot of pushback and interesting debriefs with our captain on the ship, and then the captain back home at the air station, who wasn't allowed to help us out because when you deploy to a ship, your new command is on the ship. You don't belong to the air station anymore. Even though we're like, dude, we didn't say dude, but dude, as a captain, you can talk to the captain and have some sort of weight, because everybody complains about Airedales, being too foo-foo or whatever, right? And it's like, no, safety matters. There's limits for a reason, because those rules are written in blood. And, it's one thing to be a daredevil yourself, but it is an entirely different thing when you have crew. You have their lives in your hands as the pilot. And if you don't take that seriously, oh, man.
Yeah. And then from a capabilities perspective, the lives of the people that you may have to follow on dispatch to. That if something happens to that aircraft, it goes hard landing, down hard, you're out of the fight. And then it's back to now we no longer have that capability.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Has there been a search and rescue mission where, you just felt like Superwoman, like you saved the day, like you go home and you feel like this is everything I signed up for and then some?
For sure. I've got a real one and then a funny one.
Okay.
Of the actual, superhero feeling of you did it, you saved it, is from Alaska on that deployment. We had taken the helicopter off of the ship and we were out of Dutch Harbor. and a call came in for a lady having seizures on a neighboring island and actively seizing, having all these problems. And when we went to launch, classic Coast Guard story where it is like, it's not nighttime yet, but, terrible weather. So storming, low clouds, fog, heavy rain, strong winds. And so we, run out to the helicopter, get it spun up, my entire side. So now co-pilot still, right? I'm on the co-pilot side because he's going to do any of the tough hoisting and the cool guy stuff, right? I'm just going to help on the left. My entire side, dead. So we had an electrical short. And to not have the redundancies that are necessary for safety of flight things, right? You have to really, then we all sit there and we're like, do you want to go? But that's a perfect example of risk management for saving a life.
So you take a vote on the aircraft.
Yeah.
You good? You good? You good?
Yeah, we all have
go.
to talk about it. We all have to be in agreement about it. And you have to really understand your systems to know whether or not that's a smart decision to be going, or are you putting yourselves in danger? And so some of the things that we had lost with that electrical shortage is I wasn't able to see the radar picture. And when you're flying in terrible weather, that radar is painting whether or not you're going to go into rocks or are there any ships in front of you? Because you're flying at a low level over the water, say 50 to 100 feet. Some big ships are that tall, if not taller.
Sure.
And when there's fog that only gives you quarter of a mile, maybe, visibility, that radar, and it depends on how fast you're moving, right? But you can go through a quarter of a mile real quick when you're flying. So you got to be very careful. So me not having a radar was kind of scary because then, he's the only one. And so if he doesn't pick up on something, that's where having, the two pilots is just, you back each other up. So we didn't have that, and then we didn't have fuel. The computer for telling you, how many miles to the gallon that you have left. It's not exactly how it works, but it's that idea. Pounds, yep. Yeah. How many pounds of fuel do you have left? Which then you do the math to see how much flying time you have, which is different because of cruising, just like cruising on the highway, you get better miles per gallon. But if you're hovering is the thing that takes up the most amount of fuel. It's the most demanding thing. And so you have less time. And so we didn't have that computer to do the math for us. So I was just going to be hand doing it, which blonde hair, you got to be careful sometimes, But it was fine. We made it, or we ultimately made the decision to continue to go save her. And then you throw in this coordination piece with Life Flight, where she needed serious help. So all we were going to do was take her from that island to another island that actually had a runway, so that the Life Flight plane could come in, and we were going to transfer her to, way better medical care than what was on any of these islands. And then they were taking her to Anchorage. And so there's a lot of coordination happening, and my side goes dead. So that's a bummer, but we take off going, and I will forever remember as we come around the island, because you take off, you go north, and then you head east, and you wrap around the island, and it was kind of like a moon shape, a crescent moon, where then you come into the bay. But the winds were coming out of the west. And again, downdrafts. Mm-hmm. Those downdrafts were hitting the water so hard that it was creating splashes just from the wind. And so then, as we were looking at that, you have to figure out how are you going to fly in there and land somewhere safe. And unfortunately, where they had her, she was at a canning facility on one side, the right-hand side as you come in. And it was very unsafe. That's a huge part of where the downdrafts were coming in. So we said, and there's a big parking lot-ish helicopter pad sort of there. And so they thought that was going to be great, but it was very unsafe. So we said, we can't go there. We got to go to the middle of this place where there is a helicopter pad, because that's how people get there And the helicopter company, the weather was so bad, they said they're not willing to fly. And so we, you can't see wind per se, but you're trying to dodge these downdrafts as you get in, and we turn the helicopter around, drop down on the helicopter pad. So we're like, oh wait. And actually before that, we had to go to the next door island, pick up the flight nurse, because our rescue swimmer, is an EMT, but because this woman was so bad, we thought we should get the nurse.
That's a Coast Guard nurse.
It was a life flight nurse.
Okay.
So that plane had made it in. We go over, pick her up, and then we fight all the way in, land. Now, because that woman wasn't able to be picked up right away, we actually ended up having to shut the helicopter down, and they put her on a fishing vessel and brought her across the bay, which takes a lot of time. And we thought that we radioed back to our land unit, the sector, to say, hey, we have to shut the helicopter down. That transmission didn't make it through, so we shut the helicopter down to conserve fuel. And every 15 minutes, you're supposed to check in with them. And after 30 minutes, if you haven't checked in, they think that you have crashed. So then protocol is they're supposed to start launching Coast Guard assets to go save our butts so that we don't die in the freezing water. Hopefully we have stayed alive enough, right? And we basically hit that 30-minute mark because we wait for her to come across. We walk like quarter of a mile to the end of a dock, load her into a litter, help carry her from the dock back to our helicopter. And it was rough. I mean, it was graphic of watching somebody seize, and that sound is just not pretty. Mm-hmm. But we get her back in the helicopter, fire it up, and right when you take off, you're supposed to check back in with sector. So we do, and they're yelling at us, we thought you crashed, you're supposed to check in, and and so then we're firing back like, hey, we can't fight right now. Like, we're still in it. We tried. But then you have to battle those downdrafts out because you're still getting slammed. So now it's in front of you, and you're seeing where most of them are happening. Cat paws is one of the things that they talk about, is you can see where it's hitting.
Oh yeah.
And so you navigate out of that. You get back to the other island, transfer her to the plane, take off, come back to Dutch Harbor. And we're still just doing hand fuel, and you're fighting the low fog, the heavy rain, the crazy winds all the way back. The radar still, right, relying on him not to have us hit any rocks, which of course we didn't. We were fine. But you have a 200-pound rule of you have to land with 200 pounds. If you go below that, there has to be a good reason. And there's times when you're allowed to, like, if you're saving a life and you're taking them to the hospital or whatever, and hovering took longer.
Sure. It's
okay. But it's a little uneasy when the computer's not doing it for you. You're like, how much do I actually have? Because it's all guesswork. And so right as we landed, we got that 200-pound light. And so we were like, whew, thank God we made it. Because 200 pounds is about 20 minutes of regular flight. So it's about 10 minutes of hovering, and you're like, oh, it's pretty close. But so that's one that felt really good because, you get her to the life flight and the better care. They take her to Anchorage, and that's one of the times where we actually got to hear back that whatever serious things were going on, and she was having like major brain problems from all those seizures. She was fine. They were able to pull her out and get her back to good health.
Great. And
that's a success story where you're like, oh, thank God, we went through so much to make that happen. And then conversely, when I'm on my very first live hoist is what we call it. After you've gone through the training, you're a co-pilot, but you've got an experienced aircraft commander. You get a call. Sometimes they'll let you sit right seat to gain that experience before you're truly aircraft commander because they're right there. They'll help you out. And so there was a scuba diver that had the bends. It got stuck down and then had nitrogen and, all the things that happen if you've been down for too long, you don't come up appropriately. So protocol with that is you stay as low altitude as you possibly can because the higher up you bring them, the more problems they're going to have. It's worse for them. And so my aircraft commander said, all right, it's your day. Let's go. And he had been picked up by a Coast Guard boat. So that's how we practice. So my first live hoist was so simple. It's everything that you train for. It's to a Coast Guard 45. You pick him up right off the back. He was able to get into the basket, didn't have to do anything with the litter. So and he was a tiny old man, like smaller than me. And he's in the basket, we bring him into the back, and you stay low over the water, and then you zip. You're going fast to get him to a decompression chamber. So we bring him to Seattle, land on the top of the hospital, and then, we're super worried, and he's old. And then he just climbs out of the basket and walks off to the hospital, but totally fine. And you're like, wait a second, you're supposed to wait for the EMTs or like the nurses to come out and help you. And
he's like, nah, I got it.
Yeah, and he was still in his wetsuit, and he's just walking into the hospital. So you excited that you got to do the thing, but he was totally fine.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that, everything you wanted to do since the heart snap.
Yeah, 13.
And at 13, you knew you wanted to be a pilot. You successfully navigated your way to the Coast Guard Academy, which is no easy feat. It's not like they let everybody into that.
Yeah, thanks.
Right? So you get in there, you do well, you get into, I don't know what the Coast Guard calls it, the fleet is what we would call
the fleet,
it, right?
Yep.
So you get into the fleet.
Graduate, go to the fleet.
Go to the fleet, and then you get your dream of going to be a helicopter pilot. And then you had mentioned, some concussions and that kind of thing. What all happened with that?
Yeah. So I played a lot of sports, and I had multiple concussions even prior to going to flight school. And actually on my first day of flight school, reporting to the unit, haven't gone through any of the medical screening, which is very intense. And there's a lot of, I don't know if it's folklore, but there's just such a reputation that precedes it of they're looking for any excuse to not let you in. So I got T-boned first day, and, side of my head hits the window. I've got neck whiplash. I was in rough shape, but denied medical care so that there was no evidence of that because I hadn't gone through NAMI yet. And so hid all of that, and thankfully made it through the screening process. But that made the beginning of flight school for about the first year pretty tough. Reading something, 2, 3, 4, 10 times before I even remembered what I read, let alone did I internalize it, because there's so much memorization you have to do for flight school. It's a big fire hose of information. They just say retain it. And it's just one of the things. So that was a pretty bad concussion. Back in November of 2016. And I had gotten a couple when I was at the academy, but once I got up to Port Angeles and right after I made aircraft commander, you go from being Robin, you make it to Batman. And I'm super excited and I'm proud, and I can't wait to turn around and start teaching the kids behind me how to think like a Coast Guard helicopter pilot. Getting ready for duty one day, I just slipped. It's an embarrassing story. I wish I had a better cool story, like saving somebody that I did something cool, but I just slipped getting out of my shower. And I hit my head and my neck on my bathroom counter. And got a really bad concussion from that. And recovery protocol at that time was, you go into a dark room and you don't come out until you've gone 3 days without a headache. I lied to get out of that room because we are now over 4 years since I hit my head that time, and I have not gone a single day without a headache. So I was in there for just under a month, and I started to go insane, legit. There's no screens, no music, no reading. So yeah, no phone, no laptop, no nothing.
And just quiet the mind.
Yeah, and I was in a lot of pain. Physically, I was in a lot of pain, and I had such bad headaches, and my neck is not right. And so I started to go, for me, of like how there's a heart click moment. There's also a mind click moment when you start to lose your mind a little bit of, I understand now why isolation works as a punishment. Because I was stuck alone with all my demons of my past. And that was a really hard time to be there like that. And so I fully admit, I lied and said that I was fine. I needed to get out of that dark room. And there was these percentage stages of what my recovery was supposed to go. So 0% was the dark room. 25% should have meant that I had gone 3 days without a headache. But then I could have very limited, but some, screen time. I could try to read again. I could even cook for myself at home, and very small things around the house. And then 50% was I was going to be able to do all of my house things, start to drive. I could go to the grocery store and even start phasing back into work. I was, before I hit my head, I was working in the operations department. And then after I hit my head was when we have a whole, everybody changes jobs. And I was going to become the admin department head, which is an honor. That's definitely for somebody much more senior, not a first tour pilot. So I was very excited to have had the confidence from the command to be able to do that. But in my concussed state, that was asking a lot. So at 50%, I was going to be able to start phasing back into work as a department head at this unit. And then 75% was going to mean that I was, fully functioning on all levels, just not flying yet. But then 100%, you can fly. And that obviously never happened. And a couple months after I hit my head in the bathroom, I had one of those, not just a soccer tent, but like a really, really big soccer tent, the collapsible ones. I was helping some people at like this barbecue thing, and the center of it just perfectly, as they were doing the corners and I was trying to help them coordinate, just perfectly fell right on the top of my head. Got another concussion. Not a good story. None of my stories are good, right? Where I'm like, dang it. And then, so that was only 2 months after that first one. So that's not enough time to recover from a concussion. Like, your brain is still very sensitive, susceptible. They're very susceptible to further damage. And so I hit my head then. And then 2 months after that, I was trying desperately to prove to the Coast Guard that I was fine. So I'm trying to work, do my admin job and trying to work out like regular, and had joined our adult rec league soccer team because we, play in town and stuff. And I played soccer in college. I know how to play. I'm not an aggressive player, right? I'm truly just there to punch the card, to be like, I'm fine. And I got shoulder checked in the side of my head by this tall, skinny dude with the ball on the far side of the field. Like, it didn't make any sense. But so I got another concussion. So 3 concussions in about a 6-month time frame. And they continue to set you back. Not that any one of those was really that bad. I never lost consciousness in the scale of TBIs and concussions, right? Like, they're not that bad, but having had previous concussions and then you do this, they do add up. And unfortunately, I never came back. I'm not the same. I definitely struggled with the classic concussion things of like emotional regulation. I would get angry. I'm not an angry person. And I would get angry at the smallest things. And I just had no tolerance like I used to. And so that was extremely alarming to myself, to be so caught off guard by this emotional roller coaster that I didn't know about. And then it also led to me having an awareness thing happen where a light bulb goes off, where I'd been home for a couple months and one of my other pilots stopped by after work one day. He just came to check on me and talk to me. So we were talking all about this work stuff and how I was going to become an admin department head. And I hadn't really thought about work for a little bit. I was still pretty much in the pain cave of me. And that next morning, I woke up and I had what I had always had, and I didn't realize this until it hadn't been there. I woke up every morning with a shot of adrenaline. Anxiety and worry. The gears start to go, and I had no idea that was unhealthy. I just thought I was such a morning person. I just thought I was always ready to go. As a personality, of being like, I thought it was a positive. I had no idea that it was actually coming from a place of anxiety and worry about all the things that I needed to do now. If I'm going to be this department head, I'm going to be in charge of people. I need to make sure that their lives are okay. Am I going to be able to come back as a helicopter pilot? Like all of a sudden, these things started to creep in, and had to learn how to deal with that one.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that I did, right? Because I was so unaware before.
So at some point, you and the Coast Guard had figured out that this wasn't working.
Yes, I waited a full year, and I give my flight surgeon a lot of credit for that, where he was on my side trying to help me out. But for a full year, having headaches every day, I finally threw in the towel. And they have all these rules, about what you can and can't do medication-wise and how long you're allowed to be out of the cockpit before they have to start a med board. And basically, through that process, I learned at some point you do have to put your health first. And the military, and I understand, but they do a very good job of teaching you that mission comes first, not your health. And so after a year of really struggling, I actually went to my flight surgeon and I said, I can't do this anymore without medication. And I understand that even trying migraine medication, will mean that I have to start a med board. But I'm done. I can't continue to do this. I need some help. And so that was a very tough decision, because then my entire life since I was 13, I'm the one saying, I give up. Oh, I don't give up. I'm stubborn.
Yeah.
And competitive. And so, they didn't take anything from me. They didn't clip my wings. I knowingly said, okay, something's got to give. Something's got to change. And so we started the med board process. That whole thing took a year and a half. So from when I hit my head, 2.5 years until I was actually out. And in that time, I knew what was coming. You know that you're going to lose the Coast Guard family, the military family of the day-to-day family, and that being your routine. And it's not like I was really doing it anyway, right? Especially that last year and a half. Like, I was able to do a couple flights kind of as like a gentleman's code, right? Of like, we had STAN is a thing, we're a standardization team. So they came out and they didn't actually test me, but they let me go. And he was like, dude, if this would have been an actual STAN flight, if I had been medically up, I would have passed. And so that kind of hurts, right? Where I was like, well, but I'm fine. Somebody that has back pain or knee pain or whatever type of pain it is, they're allowed to continue to fly, and just it's pain management. My pain just happens to be located in my head and neck. Mm-hmm. And I just kept fighting that for so long that I was like, well, I'm tough, I think, So if I think that I'm tough enough to just handle it, why can't that be given to me? Why is that autonomy not allowed as a headache as opposed to back pain? And I do fully understand that, headaches and especially migraines, especially if you start to get anything that's like an aura or visually impaired, which thankfully I don't typically, It's a huge safety concern. And so there's no argument for me there. Ultimately, me having to make that decision, or nobody made me, but I did choose to do so, was very, very tough. And then after I got out of the Coast Guard was really when I began to spiral in the sense of having no sense of direction, of even who I am anymore. If that's this thing that I chased for, from 13 to 30, the cool factor, not that the cool factor actually matters, but I no longer felt like I was me, because a huge part of all the eggs in the basket that I put into that was no longer allowed. And so as a Hail Mary, right before I actually got out of the Coast Guard, I went to an open mic. And, I love sad songs. And so I played a couple sad songs at this open mic and was just met with such love and support from this beautiful music community in my hometown, Port Angeles. Hometown is in where I've been for 7 years. And the owner of the bar happened to be there and was like, do not stop. You need to keep coming back to this open mic. And, a couple of these old guys took me under their wing, and, a restaurant just 20 minutes away, so loving, and gave me my first gig. And just, I had such positive feedback from them that Hail Mary of just being like, I need to do something for me because I've lost everything. I know I'm about to lose everything. Everything that you look at life in certain lenses, and that's the lens that I was looking at it with. And thankfully I've got different lenses now, but it was everything. And so this Hail Mary then just really helped me emotionally process. I started writing songs, and now, I'm able to get my own gigs in that little town. And the therapeutic benefits of having been able to sit down and put some of this tough stuff down to paper, and then with music, I can't almost say thank you enough to those people and to just music in general, because there's a different thing that happens inside of me, at least, and I see it with other people, that healing can happen, that just talking about it with the therapist, because now I've talked to, a few therapists, and helpful, highly recommend therapy.
Yeah.
It opened the door for me to be able to even write songs and be aware. I'm careful now to not put all my eggs in one basket of who I am. I think it was really good for me at the end of the day. It's such a blessing to have had to lose that. Because then you get to see who you are without it. And even though it was a good thing, I was living a life of very black and white service and wanted to do so, but it's still a mask that you put on that isn't all of who you are. And music is not all of who I am, but yet it is a way for me to channel things in a positive way.
Sure.
And so I'm so grateful.
Yeah. Well, I was introduced to you from Lee Stuckey with A Hero, and he was telling me about you. I was fortunate enough to be able to go down to the A Hero farm down in Shorter, Alabama, and there was a songwriting retreat happening, and I got to hear you, after the writing had occurred, I got to hear you play several of your original songs. And, to hear now the whole story and, what kind of led you to this new path in music, I'm so excited for you.
Thank
just
you.
hearing your story, the strength you have, the courage you have, not only to do the things you did in the Coast Guard, but to tell your story in music, and allow music to be a big part of the whole healing process. I think once people get to know your music and get to hear your voice and your stories and your lyrics and your experiences, I think that's that's where the Hail Mary is going to come to fruition for everybody. You're going to play us a couple songs here. What are you going to play?
I'm going to play this song called It Ain't Right, which is not grammatically correct, ain't, but It Ain't Right. In that little town, Port Angeles, I listened to this guy give such a heartfelt delivery of a song about him being sexually abused by his dad. And it gave me the courage to be able to sit and face a lot of my own demons and write about it. And so It Ain't Right is all about sexual assault and how it's not okay. And there is some defiance and anger inside of that song that says, you're a little thief, but you're not worth my grief. And actually writing that and then performing it has been very therapeutic, a lot more than I ever thought. Like it's one thing to journal about hard experiences and things that happen to you, but then it's another to share that publicly. And then there's even another level when I play that and have had people come up to me afterwards and be like, thank you for that song. It speaks to them, even if I'm careful about how I say it publicly, if whether or not I'm going to say exactly what the song is about before I sing it. But you can get an idea if you're listening to it. And especially people that have been through any sort of abusive relationship. It doesn't have to be sexual assault. I mean, physically, emotionally, there's a resonance, unfortunately, with people that understand. And so I'm proud of that song, and I'm very, very grateful to continue to perform that, and then I benefit from it every time because it does help me let go. This is called It Ain't Right. I never told, you should have known. It ain't right in your bones. Your hands are cold around my throat. It ain't right in my bones. Listen to me, you little thief. You're not worth my grief. Listen to me, you dirty little thief. You are dead to me. Never let it show how you took my soul. It ain't right, no longer whole. I walk this road, do as I'm told. It ain't right, your control. Listen to me, you little thief. You're not worth my grief. Listen to me, you dirty little thief. You are dead to me. Buried that pain in the pouring rain. My tears contained your last refrain. You hold no chains from within that grave, and of your reign no longer your slave. Listen to me, you little thief. You're not worth my grief. Listen to me,